Hello, everybody, and welcome to this episode of the Leafs Line Podcast. I am your host, Mayor Russo, joined by Evan Davis and Jared Rotenberg. We are the Adambo Romoliless show once again. It's been a while. He's always been around town lately, getting into it. This week, we actually have no clue where his whereabouts are. So if you find Adambo Romoli, or if he's even watching this, first off, you owe us a beer or so because we have no clue where you are. It was just the straight, no response. I think we texted at 4 o'clock or 5 o'clock. It's 8:06 right now, and we haven't even heard, but regardless, the show must go on, as they say, and we'll be talking about, well, not the playoff preview. I think we'll save that for a little bit down the road, but there is some teams that the playoff picture is starting to form, it's starting to solidify, and there's some teams that you could really say these guys are legit contenders, and some sleeper teams as well that can step in there and possibly get a job done. We're going to talk about two contenders from each conference, and then one sleeper pick from each conference as well. And I mean, the weather's warmer. It kind of feels a little bit more like a playoffs are approaching. I think there's only 13 or 12 games for the Maple Leafs. At least I think that's true.
Yeah,
So
exactly. Yeah.
once you start to hit the last 10 games, you're like, wow, okay, so these are the reps you're getting in. You're trying to measure up to what these playoff games are going to be about. You're going to see a lot more closer games. And just a quick Leafs perspective here before we get into all the meat and potatoes of the other teams. We thought we'd see a bit more of a playoff style last night against the Islanders, and it was very much not. And the Islanders, they might steal the show today. A sleeper team who's just fighting and have been fighting for quite a while to get that last playoff spot, or one of the last playoff spots. But let's get into it, gentlemen. I'm going to go with you, Evan. One sleeper, or not sleeper. We'll start with the sleepers after. We're going to start with the contenders. One contending team from the Eastern Conference that you got your eye on right now. I mean, there's so many to pick from. There's so many teams that are just probably going to clinch soon. I feel like the time is quickly approaching. We're going to see the nice X beside their names. They're going to be just playing their bench players and seeing how they fit and seeing that they can use them in the playoffs. But what's one team that you think can really contend in the 2023 NHL Cup, Stanley Cup playoffs?
Yeah, I said Carolina before the show, but I think I always give them love. I'm going to give love to the New Jersey Devils here, who I think have really, at the beginning of the year, they had one of the easiest schedules. So I kind of thought they had a fugazi record. It was just like they were beating teams that they should have been beating. But I mean, they're looking really, really good. They acquired Timo Meyer, so they know that their time is now. Jack Hughes, it's phenomenal. That contract he signed, I believe 2 seasons ago, is now going to look like highway robbery, paying your number one $8 million a year, I think it is. And with the salary cap increasing, that number is just going to look even better and better. I mean, on the back end, they're not as strong with sexy names, but I mean, we got to give love to Jonas Siegenthaler, who's quietly been one of the best defensive defensemen in the NHL for the past couple seasons. Dougie Hamilton has kind of been up and down, revitalizing himself, and Vitek Vanacek is playing solid
Yes.
enough for New Jersey to be second in a very, very competitive Metropolitan. They have the same amount of games played as the Rangers, but 6 points up. And it looks like they'll have a date with the Rangers. And if they do, having home ice in that type of series, I think is going to be the real X factor for them. So I'm going to give love to the New Jersey Devils.
Mm-hmm. And I mean, listen, the dogfight is going to keep on going for the rest of the season as far as the Metropolitan Division is concerned. That top place is still up for grabs despite triple digits for Carolina Hurricanes in the point category. And I mean, Vitek Vanacek, I want to shine some light on him. He's had an up and down career, very young player, but 29-8 this year. You got to feel like this guy can get it done in the playoffs. He's been doing it pretty much all year long. And then the offense, Jack Hughes, he's 81 points in 67 games. Nico Hischier, almost a point per game at 67 and 70. These guys are legit. These guys can contend. And I mean, I remember seeing them against the Leafs a couple weeks ago, and I just I couldn't forget how quick they were to the puck. And if you could do it against the Leafs, which I think we're all kind of on the same bias here that they can contend if they get over that first round hump. I mean, if you can compete with the Toronto Maple Leafs, I think you can compete with just about any team in the league. And this
Just
team, I
want to
think the
add,
New
oh,
Jersey
sorry,
Devils can
sorry.
do that. And go on, Evan.
Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you there. I just wanted to add second best road record in the
Yeah.
Eastern Conference at 26-5-4. Didn't mean to cut you off
No,
there,
no.
but I just only behind Boston. Same amount of road wins as Boston.
And you know how important it is to get the wins on the road, especially when you're playing in a packed barn, opposition barn in the playoffs as well. Jared, I'm going to go with you. What's another sleeper team in the East that we could be keeping our eyes on as we kind of get ready and anticipate the NHL Stanley Cup playoffs to come about?
Well, you look at that series of Tampa Bay versus Toronto, and I could say either the winner of that series, I'm very convinced will end up going on a deep run. But after some activity at the trade deadline, I've completely flipped and turned my back on my preseason prediction of having the Tampa Bay Lightning winning the Cup. I have them out in the first round because I have the Toronto Maple Leafs taking them out in the first round. going on a deep run, and I'm kind of teetering my expectations of maybe even throwing them as that team I'm picking to lift that shiny
Wow.
silver thing at the end of the day. I'm really happy with what the Leafs did at this year's trade deadline. I think it's fantastic. I think they crossed off, aside from the left wing issue, that still is a question mark, and I would have liked Dubas to address that. But aside from that one position, I think they've addressed all their issues of getting more bottom six depth. I think they addressed all their issues of absolutely solidifying their defensive core. And Samsonov, as well, has really taken off as a legit number one goalie, in my opinion. I mean, he's played 36 games this year, but he currently has a record of 24-9-0. So, sorry, rather 24-9-3. But regardless, like, he's had a fantastic record this year with a 914 save percentage and a 2.46 goals against average. Like, he's a legit goalie. And with that legit goalie in the net, I think there's a lot less question marks in the net than there were in previous seasons, with just the reputation of Freddie Anderson always going quiet come playoff time, with Jack Campbell being very up and down. I'm very sold on our goaltending right now. And even if Samsonov goes quiet in the playoffs, I get that Matt Murray hasn't done anything in the playoffs since a good 6 or 7 years ago. But regardless of the fact that our backup goalie just has the resume and the reputation he has, it definitely makes me a lot less scared to have to rely on him if it comes to the position that we need to rely on that goalie. And for that reason, I'm really sold on what this team did. I know we haven't seen a lot of Ryan O'Reilly since that finger injury, but the fact that we've absolutely shored up our top six, our bottom six, and our defensive core, I really think this Leafs team, as long as they could get the mental aspects out of their head, I think with the team they've assembled right now, with the team Kyle Dubas has assembled, I'm really sold on what they've done here. And I'll get rid of the bias. Like, I'm a Leafs fan. Through and through, I'm a Leafs fan, but I've never picked the Leafs as my Stanley Cup winner. In all the years we've done this podcast, which is only 2, but even just in my own years of doing predictions and whatever, I've had them going on deep runs. I've had them making conference finals appearances and whatever, but I've never been as sold on a Leafs team as I am on this team right now. I'm really sold on what they did. They know they have a bunch of contracts expiring, so they know they can't exactly wait on this one, even though I still think they will be a good team for years to come. They know this is their time to strike. Dubas knows his job is on the line, and I think those players are going to play for Kyle Dubas. And I don't know. I really think this Leafs team could do it.
And I mean, you haven't even mentioned the in-house talents that we haven't, like Kyle Yarncroc. Man, where did this come from? The production of the last, I think, 5 games. He's been leading teams in almost every category. Like, it's ridiculous. I mean, you could even see him being on the top 2 lines in the playoffs, and I wouldn't even mind that at all. Like, they're getting so much production from so many avenues. The one area I need to see, Jared, and I think you're with me, if they have any shot to make the play, or not make the playoffs, but make the Stanley Cup final, Austin Matthews has to start getting clicking, and it has to be in a very clutch situation or clutch situations, because Mitch Marner's been getting it done most of the year. Nylander, a bit of a cold stretch, but it's been proven in the long run throughout the season. You need Austin Matthews to heat up. I'm still waiting for him. You've seen a little bit of hot streaks recently, but something's got to stick sooner rather than later. And you're hoping as a Leaf fan if it is in the postseason. But I'm going to prove you guys with this question. So, I mean, Jared, you say they're going to the finals. You say they're pretty good contenders, Jared or Evan. Devils, Leafs. What's happening in that series if it goes there?
I'm picking the Leafs. I don't know. I think I trust Samsonov and Murray as a tandem a lot more than I trust Vanacek and whoever their backup is right now.
Yeah.
So I think it would, goaltending regards, I'm picking the Leafs. I think you could definitely have a question in the top 6, but even then, as much as Jack Hughes and Nico Hischier are having fantastic seasons, I still am giving the top 6 edge to the Leafs. And then in terms of depth, like, I think it's a matter of who steps up, obviously, but I like, at least on paper, a lot of what the Leafs have going on in their bottom 6, especially with the additions of guys like Noel Acciari and Sam Lafferty, guys that have really taken off lately. So I'm personally leaning on the Leafs there in that series. And then even defensively, I mean, Evan mentioned the Devils are a fantastic team, but there are a lot of holes in that defensive core that I simply don't see in regards to the Leafs. I think the Leafs shored up a lot of their defensive question marks, whereas the Devils, I wouldn't really say did that. So I don't think it's much of a debate, in my opinion. I think I'm going with the Leafs, no question, in that series.
So, Evan, if it's going to go, if you're so inclined to say that the New Jersey Devils are going to be legit contenders, what would hold them back from beating or knocking off a top team that they'd have to go through in order to reach probably the situation where you're actually getting towards the Stanley Cup final?
Yeah, I agree with Jared. It would be because their defense just sells them. I mean, like the Siegenthaler and Dougie Hamilton is your first pairing defense core is pretty solid. First line, Damon Severson has just been so quiet. I think Frank Saravelli said he might get 6 million on the open market. I don't know what open market's available in Europe, but it's not in the NHL. I'll tell you that much. Yeah, I agree with you. I would say that the Leafs would win that. Goaltending wise, I'd give the edge to Samsonov. I'm not really looking at Matt Murray. I can't like I respect your resume.
No,
That
no,
was like
that's fair. That's fair.
he was when he was this is when he was like 22 years old and like fresh in the league. Like I don't see that happening. Um but yeah, I would give it to the Leafs, but I definitely think it would go far. I don't know if I would give them a for sure, just because I don't want to discredit the Devils' offense. It can compete with anyone, I think, and especially adding Meyer to that core. I think their third line is also really good with Tatar and Hala and Mercer as well. They have a lot of talent. I think it would go 6 or 7, but I think the Leafs would win it just because star power maybe prevail, but I think it would be a very close series.
And I mean,
Absolutely, yeah.
go on, Jared, go on.
What I just want to add is I definitely am not discrediting the Devils either. I think it easily goes 6 games in my opinion. And what I will say is, if the Leafs' top guys go quiet, which they have been known to do come playoff time, I wouldn't discredit the Devils' chances of, if they could catch a Leafs team that goes asleep a little bit. Let's say the Leafs get off to, like, they win the first 2 games of the series or something, and maybe think the series is over before it's even done. I definitely wouldn't take the Devils out of it. I think that's a team that, no matter what, they always have the talent where they'll be relentless no matter what, and they'll play you up until the very end. And if the Leafs' top guys fall asleep a little bit, I wouldn't count out the Devils. But I just have to think, especially if a conference finals matchup were to come to fruition between those two teams, the Leafs would have already had to go through the Lightning and the Bruins. I just then can't see them falling to the Devils.
Yeah, I think the only thing for the Devils would just be their youth. Like they're just a lot younger than Tavares and O'Reilly. I think that might be their calling card on that top six. But other than that, it's a pick 'em in my opinion. I think it could be a pick 'em.
I mean, regardless of who you think's going to go through, I think the evidence is that the series is going to be pretty damn good. I mean, there's so
Oh,
much
I would
skill on
love
both
that.
ends, and I don't think it'd be a sweep by either parts. It would go the distance, and I think it'd make a great series as well. But I mean, there's one team, or there's a couple teams that are still in the hunt in the NHL playoffs, especially in the Eastern Conference, that are trying to actually get towards actually playing a series in April and in May. Guys, the sleeper teams, these are the ones that are the most interesting to look at, and they have so much on the line. They've been battling for quite some time, and they're trying to get over the finish line and get into a relatively good playoff position. Evan, I'm gonna go with you. What is the sleeper team in Evan Davis's mind that can maybe make some noise, not only if they get in, but once they get in and get the party started?
Yeah, I realized my sleeper team was the Devils. Now I'm gotta scramble a little bit here. I made a mistake there. So let me just quickly go on the fly. Honestly, I think the sleeper team here. Crap, I gotta go on the fly. I'm gonna kill myself
There's
for
a
saying
couple.
this,
You could make an
but
argument for a lot.
I feel like the Florida Panthers are starting to pick it up at the right time again. I, I kind of screwed my sleeper team because it was the Devils, so big fart right there. But I didn't want to say Carolina or the others because we know that. But I mean, the Florida Panthers, they're 7-2-1 in their last 10 games right now. I think Matthew Tkachuk 15 points in his last 8 games. You know, they just lost brutally to the Philadelphia Flyers, but the Florida Panthers have just been atrocious on back to back. So you're not going to see that come playoff time. Uh, I just think if something has to give, it's just the fact that they're finally picking it up. I remember they were at the bottom of the East at one
Mhm.
point, and now they're starting to kind of ramp things up again. And yeah, as Jared has said numerous times, you start at zeros come playoff time here. And although their goaltending has been a little up and down, Bobrovsky's just living it up in South Beach, robbing people. But I think their offense has been really good. Brandon Montour was a hell of a find. And I think they've just really done a great job of looking at the waiver market for defensemen and just not having to spend that much on that position. I think that's what's really helped them. I think Montour is top five in points for Florida. He's done a really good job. But yeah, I think they would be maybe someone, not maybe make it out of the first round, but I think they could at least make it a series against someone because I just can't. I look at the names and I think, how can you not?
Yeah.
With Verhage at 40 freaking goals. Like Carter Verhage has 40 goals. What is the NHL?
Yeah. And I mean, they've been playing catch up for quite some time this season. It always feels like kind of one step forward, two steps back with this team. And the offense is always the thing carrying them towards that forward step. And I mean, only 1 point ahead over the Pittsburgh Penguins in the wild card. Doesn't look like they'll be catching Tampa Bay in the Atlantic. That seems like a big stretch, but they've been relatively hot and they got the firepower to get them over the hump. Just a matter of learning to put those skills together. And it's hard to put in a quick period of time where you want to value the defense as well, because you're not going to be able to outscore your opponents in the playoffs. It's going to be one of the hardest things to do, and sort of bitten them in the butt in playoffs previously. So, I mean, the Florida Panthers definitely can get in. I think they have all the skill sets to be a regular season team and get over that hump. But I mean, in regards to the playoffs, it's going to be really hard to not only just change your entire mindset, the entire game plan that you've been focusing on all year, and then start something new. Because again, you start at zero in the playoffs, but it's also a lot of your things carry over. That's what the regular season is for. It carries into the postseason. So it's going to be hard to get rid of those old habits. But again, Florida can make some noise. That's what they do. And they got some big names to do it. Jared, sleeper team in the Eastern Conference. I mean, the Islanders, they're kind of right there. I feel like you might go with that pick.
Yeah, that's my pick. I mean, I get they don't have Barry Trotz there anymore as their coach, but I mean, old habits die hard. They still have that same play style. They're still a team that just absolutely outworks you. And right now, as it currently is set, they would be playing Carolina in the first round. I'm still picking Carolina to win that series, but I think no matter who they play, which division winner they play, whether it is Boston, whether it is Carolina, they're going to be a hard out. No matter what, they're a team that if you catch yourself sleeping against the New York Islanders, like we saw last night against New York versus Toronto, they catch any team sleeping and they'll smell blood in the water and absolutely go off. And they're just one of those teams that they've repeatedly 2 years in a row in both 2020 and 2021 when they ended up going to the conference finals. It just happened that they were one of those teams no one picked to go far, but in the playoffs, that's a team that just knows they could wake up. And in the past, one of the things that's ultimately been their undoing is the fact that they haven't had a lot of top six scoring. Well, this year they went out and got Bo Horvat. And I mean, at the time, I definitely questioned it because I'm like, they gave up a lot of futures. And I didn't really think they were going to be a team that was such a guarantee to make the playoffs. I thought it was questionable. But you know what? Now that they're pretty much solidified, I'd say, even if not solidified in a playoff spot, chances are I don't see a lot of teams overtaking them. So if they make the playoffs, they now have Bo Horvat added to their team, and that just gives them that much more offensive upside and offensive scoring. So like they're one of those teams that can absolutely they could like defend you into winning a round. They have Ilya Sorokin, one of the best goalies in the entire league, in their net. So that helps them. Great defensive core, as I mentioned, great bottom six. They're defensive, they're physical. And now their biggest flaw for years that they finally addressed is they have some scoring talent. So they're not a team I'm picking to go very far, but if they do end up going far, the pieces were all there for that. And even if they have to upset a team like Boston or Carolina that no one's picking them to do, they have more than enough skill to do it if that team absolutely catches a team sleeping.
Yeah, I
Did
mean,
anybody else? Oh, sorry.
no, go on.
Anybody else realize Bo Horvat has 9 points in 20 games with the Islanders?
Yeah.
Yeah, he's gone quiet. I mean, he was unreal with Vancouver. He's gone quiet, but regardless, he still has the skill and the fact that he's playing alongside Anders Lee. Like they have a decent, at least it's not great, but they have at least a decent top six that I could say with Bo Horvat there centering their top line. They at least have a chance, and they address their biggest flaw. Like they haven't been able to score in the past. Now they have Bo Horvat, which I get that he's been bad with the Islanders, but throughout his entire year, he's been a pretty damn good scorer.
Yeah, I
Bo
mean,
Horvat has 1 point in 9 games.
Okay,
In his last
that's
9 games, 1 assist, and he has 2 points in his last 13.
That is awful.
I think that's a
again, he still has
system
the
change
skill.
though for him. Like
Yeah, maybe it is, but
we saw the same thing with
maybe
Matt
not this.
Barzell. The same thing with Matt, not necessarily the same players, but very highly offensive. And I mean, their head coach that was brought in was to help get Barzell back into that rookie form, which he had, and slowly the pieces started to get together, but nothing serious yet. I think kind of Bo Horvat is seeing that trend, and like you come to Long Island, you can't change that foundation. It's just going to be engraved in that system. And unfortunately for him, the point totals aren't going to match. That's kind of maybe why they locked him up for so long, because if he's not getting the point totals for so long, he might want out. And you can't really do that when you're signed for an 8-year deal. But I mean, he might be signed. Well, he is signed for sure if they do go through the playoffs this season. So he's going to be a big piece, something that they're going to have to rely on to score their way out of some issues. But the Islanders are always there for a safe bet when you want to defend themselves out of some issues. That's why they're a great sleeper pick. And that's why they have a chance to upset so many teams in the Eastern Conference. But we're going to move to the West. And I mean, it's very much different than the Eastern Conference, considering where the point totals are at. You got a team like the Nashville Predators, which we were talking on the pre-show here, where they're just a couple points out, but you wouldn't even think Nashville Predators would have anywhere near a shot at the NHL playoffs. But here they are, just because of how kind of weak the Western Conference has been this year. But again, there's teams that have taken their runs. There's teams that are trying to take their runs, and we're going to talk about them right now. Evan Davis, what is one contending team that you can see in the Western Conference that is like, wow, okay, these guys, not only can they make some noise in the first two rounds, but they could see themselves in round 3 and 4 very quickly.
Yeah, just given how wide open the Western Conference is, I'm going to go with the LA Kings. I think they really got an A plus, maybe an A at the deadline. I think getting Jonas Korpisalo and Vladislav Gavrikov were two big pieces that you needed to fill. You needed a left defenseman to play with Matt Roy, and I mean, it was no secret you needed a goaltender. No disrespect to Jonathan Quick, but I mean, the last 4 seasons, you see little spurts of prime Jonathan Quick, but I'd say 98% of the time you were looking at a digressing goaltender. But Jonas Korpisalo has been great with LA. I think 3-0-1 with a 196 goals against, like a 920 save percentage. He's been what they needed, and Gavrikov too. The defensive numbers since these two guys have come to LA, I think they're at least second in defensive ratings. I know they're really good at limiting offensive chances for opponents. They've done a really good job. I think they have the second best record since the All-Star break, right behind Vegas. I mean, they're clicking at the right time here. And, we used to joke about how the Kings had a minus goal differential. I mean, ever since Jonathan Quick left, it's gone from a -4 to a +18. So I think it just really speaks to what Gavrikov and Korpisalo have done. And now I'm more comfortable going into a playoff round with Korpisalo and Copley as my goaltenders. Phoenix Copley has been phenomenal this year, really earned that extension. And again, just Western Conference is so wide open compared to the East that I don't think it's out of the picture to say that the LA Kings can make it on a deep playoff run.
And we had the trailer last season, right? When they went up against the Edmonton Oilers and they pushed the series pretty decently far. And I
Without
mean,
Drew Doughty.
yeah, and they had some missing pieces. Then they come into the offseason and say, listen, we got a chance here. We could make something happen here. We thought last year was going to be just a quick rebuild or the first step of a long rebuild. And it was nothing but the case. It was very quick, more sort of a retooling, and they were off and ready to go. And you bring in guys like Kevin Fiala, who is 68 points in 66 games and has just been a lethal scorer as always in his career. He brought it to LA and he's been getting it done. And you can expect that in the playoffs. And like you said, Evan, the wild, wild west, it's wide open. And any team can really make a big run. Any team could be a legit contender because it's just so not lopsided. It's just everyone's for the taking. It's so much different than the East where it's so compact and you kind of have these picks where guys are going to go far. It's these guys and then these guys. The West is just all over the place. You can do whatever you want in that conference and find a way into the Stanley Cup final. And I guess we'll have to wait and see what happens with these guys. They got all the pieces. It's about putting them together. The hardest part to do in the NHL season. Jared, what's a contending team in the Western Conference that you have on your tab list?
Actually, I got two I want to shout out a little, but I'm going to start with the Colorado Avalanche. I mean, they've been heavily injured all year, and there was a little bit of time where it looked like they were almost going to find themselves with all those injuries, just potentially even out of the playoffs or stuck in a wild card spot. But it appears with the play lately of both the Dallas Stars and the Winnipeg Jets, who have been basically handing away the Central Division on a silver platter, now the Colorado Avalanche have climbed their way back up into the top 3 of the Central Division, and this team, even though they aren't completely healthy, they still have Gabriel Landeskog out, their captain, but they are looking dominant as of late. I mean, they're on a 6-game winning streak, but they are a spectacular team. We saw it last year where they dominated the Stanley Cup playoffs with 2 sweeps on the road to winning a Stanley Cup. And with how wide open the Western Conference is right now, I wouldn't be too surprised if the Colorado Avalanche find their way on another deep run, just based on how skilled they are. And even Cale Makar, who is their absolute, the golden boy of their cup run last year, he's had a little bit, I'm not going to say a quiet year because he's still probably top 5 in Norris voting, but for his standards and the standards that he rightfully so has set, he hasn't necessarily reached his top form, and he's still been fantastic. So their entire team, from the offensive core to the defensive core, they're spectacular. I didn't love what they did at the deadline, but it was decent enough, short, like getting a guy like Lars Eller to just shore up their bottom six, which I guess was their only real area of need. Somehow Dennis Mulligan has become a top line forward there, and he's still been unbelievable. So they're a great team, and they're a team that I'm really scared of, especially for another team that they were my sleeper at the beginning of the year, and I'm gonna shout them out in a little bit. But for the team that I picked to go far, it's a shout out, but it's a team that flies. It's going to be a hard road getting through those Colorado Avalanche, and maybe more so than I anticipated at the beginning of the year. I mean, I talked a lot about how I'm not sold on their goaltending, but I wasn't sold on their goaltending last year with Darcy Kemper either. But they showed that with how good their team is in front of Darcy Kemper last year, and now with how good they've been in front of their goaltending, Georgiev this year, they're a team that could go far even in spite of a not so great goaltending. So that's a scary team, absolutely contender. And another team that I have not given a lot of love since we started this show, that's the Edmonton Oilers. I've been very quick to talk about how bad I think their roster construction is. I've ripped apart Ken Holland. I've said the team's a mess. And then they go out and actually at this trade deadline really impressed me with the moves they made. They didn't make a lot of moves, but the two moves they made, bringing in a depth forward in Nick Bukestad, as well as getting Matthias Ekholm to shore up the defensive core, I think these are two moves that I don't necessarily want to say they're sneaky good additions, because I think a lot of people are giving them. But listen, they're sneaky good in the sense that they're not massive names, but I think anyone who at least knows what these players are capable of will tell you that these are two moves that can absolutely fix the issues that plagued this Edmonton roster for years. And now just looking at what the roster is currently, I know this could change come playoff time, but they now are putting all of Nugent Hopkins, Draisaitl, and McDavid on three separate lines. So whereas last year they basically had a top six that was unbelievable and a very suspect bottom six, they're now spreading the wealth, and it, at least early returns, it's working so far. This team looks terrifying. And even with some question marks in net with Stuart Skinner, who has been good, but again, it's a young rookie goalie, has never really had a long track record of being great. And Jack Campbell has been terrible this year. When the playoffs start, when everything goes back to zero, we've seen for many years Jack Campbell, at times, he could go hot. And if Jack Campbell goes hot, or if Stuart Skinner continues his great play, it could take a little bit of luck, sure. But the Edmonton Oilers have the pieces there that I wouldn't be too shocked if they go on a deep playoff run, which isn't something I thought I was going to be saying a few months ago.
I mean, the Edmonton Oilers, right? You'll go look at them last year, and out of all the Canadian teams, they went the farthest. We got a blessing of a series with the Calgary Flames, and you kind of just figured that the only thing that was keeping them from going over the hump was guys get tired. It's a reality of human nature. You can't be just scoring all the goals in the series and expect to win it every single time. I'm just talking about Connor McDavid and Leon Draisaitl here. But you know what? They go out, they fix a bit of issues, they get some bottom six, and you just got to hope to these guys click in the playoffs, because you can't afford to have. I know the Wild West is always open, but there's a limit. I think the hockey gods won't allow Connor McDavid to carry them to the promised land on his back and breaking his knees while doing it. No, you need some guys to help him get the journey started and getting it going, getting this team over the line. And it's going to be interesting to see how they do it. Again, you could only do so much on paper. Ken Holland, the guy you hate, absolutely, Jared. Which
he's a dartboard of him.
Yeah, you guys live together. Is there like a little dart thing with Ken Holland's picture on it?
Absolutely,
right at the front door.
Okay. Exactly. So when you walk in, and if you're getting guests, you just say, "Hey, just throw this. If you hit it, you make me happy. You can stay another night." You know?
Yeah, pretty much. Yeah.
Yeah. So if you guys are new to the show, Ken Holland is not on Jared's favorite persons list by any stretch of the imagination. But today he gets a nice little reward. I guess it's a nice
I think he did a good job. You know, I'm not afraid of changing my opinion if someone shows they deserve it. And Ken Holland for many years didn't address the main issues. I mean, I did a whole ad lib in school all about off the dome, just talking about how bad the flaws in this roster are. I mean, it's like clockwork now. I've said it so much. Their bottom six sucks. Their defense sucks. Their goaltending sucks. Until they go out and actually address those issues, I wasn't going to give them credit. And now they address those issues. Yep. And here I am, the first person to say they did a good job. And I'm ready to say this team looks legit now.
Yeah. All right. So Jared's back on board with Oils Country. Let's see if they ride the hot hand into the playoffs and through the playoffs as well.
I just wanted to throw in. I mean, I didn't even talk about how good Zach Hyman has been this year. Like Zach Hyman and Nuge have been fantastic.
Yeah.
Like
Zach Hyman's invited to Shabbat dinner.
Exactly. Guys around McDavid and Draisaitl have woken up, and their bottom six has gotten shored up. I think there's a lot to like with what the Edmonton Oilers did.
Yeah, they're going to be fun to watch, man. I mean, when you got Connor McDavid and Leon Draisaitl there, it's always going to be fun. But I'm really interested to see how these guys do. It's a new year, a new system in place, a new set of lineups in place, and we'll see what they can do with it this time around. But guys, sleeper teams, we got one each, and then we're going to sign things off here in the Leafs Line podcast. Jared, I'm going to go with you and then to Evan, just to mix it up a little bit. Jared, sleeper team. I think we kind of know which one this is, considering how much we've talked about it throughout the year. However, I will bring up this. You wanted you there was a good portion of the year where you said this team was not a sleeper team and it was a straight contending team, and they've slipped down. They haven't been the contenders that we thought.
Yeah.
Let's go into it. I'm gonna say it.
There, bud.
I'm gonna say it before you do. The Winnipeg Jets is Jared's sleepers team. If you did not know, currently they sit 83 points into a second wild card spot. I believe that's 4 points over the Calgary Flames.
They were 1 point first in the Central.
Yeah, they were in a really nice position. They had it all made in the shade, and they just made it a little bit more harder on themselves. Maybe they want that postseason pressure. Live on the edge a little bit before you get into it. But Jared, take us through.
They want the movie run to be a little bit more dramatic. They want to add some parts in the documentary with Blake Wheeler just sitting down there stressed. But no, like I won't shy away from it. Their second half of the season has been atrocious. It's been awful. Everything that I praised and loved about their first half of the year that made me believe my pick of them going to the Stanley Cup Finals was possible, they've essentially washed away with their second half of the year because all the guys that were very hot have gone quiet and their team's been bad. And most importantly, the most important guy that has gone quiet that's led to their bad play is Connor Hellebuyck. He was absolutely incredible. He was right there behind Linus Ullmark in the Vezina voting, or at least the Vezina predictions. And he's gone quiet lately. And it shows when Connor Hellebuyck goes quiet, their team does. And if Connor Hellebuyck does not return to his great play, any team, whether it's Vegas or Dallas, is going to make very quick workings of the Winnipeg Jets if their goaltending doesn't play hot. But it's a sleeper team for a reason. And the reason it's a sleeper team is because it takes one player for this team to either get swept or potentially even win the entire Western Conference. And I think that's how integral Connor Hellebuyck is on what the Winnipeg Jets are going to do. They live and they die on the back of Connor Hellebuyck. And I think he's a good enough goalie that honestly, listen, his second half of the year hasn't shown any evidence of this. It's a prediction just based on what he's done throughout his career in the last few years, even though recent returns haven't shown this. But Connor Hellebuyck's a fantastic goaltender. I'm very sold on his ability to step up. And I think that the defensive core, even though Josh Morrissey hasn't been as great in the second half of the year, and their defense as a whole hasn't been as great in the second half of the year, if Connor Hellebuyck wakes up, this team could be dragged kicking and screaming on a deep run. I'll say that right now. And if Connor Hellebuyck's playing out of his mind, I find it very hard to predict one of the great teams, or both of the great teams I talked about in my past thing, talking about the contenders of the West, both Colorado and both Edmonton. Fantastic teams, but I have some question marks in the net. And I think Connor Hellebuyck's a good enough goalie that he could absolutely steal a series or even potentially 4. Like, I think he's that good if he gets hot. And for that reason, they're a sleeper team. They're a wild card. They're just barely clinging on to the last spot in the West. So it is a sleeper. I'm not going to say they're a contender. I'm not going to say they're a lock, a shoe-in, anything along those lines. But I'm going to say Connor Hellebuyck's good enough. I truly believe that. And I think with who they're going to have to go through, I think they have the goaltending advantage in every series they're going to go through in the Western Conference. It's just a matter of if the other guys could wake up and help Connor Hellebuyck along the way. And they've shown at little spurts throughout the year that they can. I do think Mark Scheifele, Blake Wheeler, Pierre-Luc Dubois, they're great players. And if they could step up and help out their goaltender, if Neil Pionk and Josh Morrissey, who have been great in little spurts, as I mentioned, if they can continue their great play, I think this Jets team is still legit, in my opinion.
And do you think them being in a wild card position now, do you think that adds a little bit more fuel to the flame and like the pressure that they've been kind of facing to not only hang on to a playoff spot, but try and move up in the Central since they've kind of fell from it? Do you think that's better for the team going in? Would you rather have that or them just sitting at top, feeling like they got it all made in the shade and can get through teams left, right, and center? Like, do you think this little set of pressure, like we might not make the playoffs with a couple weeks remaining in the season? Do you think that's going to prove to be vital and something that they can use to their advantage when they get into the playoffs?
Could I answer?
You guys
no.
answer.
Evan, go ahead.
They're lost. I think I don't know. I don't know if Rick Bowness lost the room after the All-Star break. I just don't see a way where pressure is going to help them because they're dealing with pressure right now. Like they've gone from first in the Central to now the last wild card spot. And let's not discredit Vegas, LA, or Minnesota or Dallas, who they might have to play in the first round. They're probably going to get gentlemen swept if they do that. I don't know what happened to them. Uh, something happened over the All-Star break where it's just gone south from the end. And to say that once they get into the playoffs, the pressure is going to kick in, like pressure should be kicking in already because you've fallen so far. And now while you're declining, all these teams are getting hot. So like, I, I don't know. I mean, for what was such a promising team, and we thought we were going to give Jared his flowers. I mean, it's not like we're going to dog on Jared for making a horrible pick. It was a great pick. He's not the coach.
Yeah. No, and I think
No,
one thing about Winnipeg that we have to say needs to step up if they want to have this chance of actually going a decent length in the playoffs would have to be you need the leaders to step up. Leadership has been the big kind of Achilles heel for this team. I know they stripped Blake Wheeler of the captain, I believe this past offseason, if I'm not mistaken.
Yep.
Yeah. And I mean, they bring in a new coach because leadership from the bench wasn't living up to par, living up to speed. So that is going to be a big one that you have to look out for. Is Blake Wheeler going to be a vocal catalyst in the room? Is Mark Scheifele going to follow suit? And is Rick Bowness going to be the guy that they brought him in to be? We saw that in the beginning of the season where, wow, this guy brought in some changes because you know what he's going to be. He's a Hall of Fame coach. He's going to come in and make big changes. And he did that. And you saw the rewards from it. But it kind of got lost in the storm on the second half of the season. You need these things to come back to fruition. That leadership has to be the forefront of discussion when they get into the playoffs. I think that's something you cannot lose, and they have lost it. It's you can't say they haven't. I get that they've dropped points. I get that the players haven't been living up to speed, but it's those leadership things, the things that they've been working so hard to get back ever since they lost it, that's what needs to be living full-heartedly in the playoffs. But Jared, last thing before we move on to Evan's pick about the Winnipeg Jets.
Well, I'm just going to respond to your initial question. Like,
Yeah.
is the pressure something that's going to help them out? I'm going to completely agree with Evan in the sense that at this point, they need to be feeling the pressure. But what I will say is it all depends, like the answer to your question, it all depends on how well they get out of this. If they start feeling the pressure now and crumble and they end up getting overtaken by a Calgary or a Nashville, it's an absolute disaster. But if they can, it's basically what I'm saying is it's not me deciding how this pressure is going to affect them. Their results on the ice are going to show how well this pressure affects or ends up negating them. Because ultimately, if this pressure leads to them crumbling and being overtaken, it's a disaster. But if they can use this and if they end up making it, even if they remain a second wildcard team, if they end up solidifying themselves into a playoff spot, they can at the very least give themselves a sigh of relief. Okay, we dodged an absolute bullet. We made it into the playoffs. And now they're going to say, let's say it's they have a stretch at the end of the year where they need to win every single game in like a 3-game stretch to guarantee themselves a spot in the playoffs. If they can get through all those hurdles, make their way into a playoff spot, that is something I do believe the room could. It's not a they will, but it's a prediction from someone completely outside the Winnipeg locker room. I believe that's absolutely something that you could say they could rally around and say, okay, we absolutely had a disaster. Like there's no way around it. We had a disaster of the second half of the year. But at the end of the day, we maintained our spot in the playoffs. We won the necessary amount of games we need to win to get ourselves in there. And now they're going to look at it, okay, Helly, you gotta step up a little bit. All of us, we gotta step up a little bit. And listen, they're a team that at the very least has shown they have the skill to go far when everything's clicking. And if they make it into the playoffs, solidify that spot, even when the sky is absolutely falling there in Winnipeg, I do think that there's a chance that this could end up turning around into one of those stories where they had a disaster, but they found a way to pick it back up and play to their true potential when it really counts in the playoffs.
Yep. Damage control is going to be the biggest one that they're going to be looking at. And I mean, it feels like out of all the teams, at least in the NHL going into the playoffs, that you can kind of say are going to kind of get there. If you're really looking at it pretty closely, I think the Jets would fall into that unless something really bad happens. I think they're going to get in. But I mean, out of all those teams, I think this series that's going to be coming forth for them, it's going to be all about their identity. Their identity is going to be on the line. And it's about if they want to actually go out and grab it or if they want to defend it, and they cannot crumble. That's the one thing. Because then you're just going to go into a constant circle of the continuous Jets crumble in the playoffs that it's just been too familiar for Winnipeg Jets fans. So that is something they have to get past for sure. Evan, you.
I just want to throw in one
Yeah.
more thing. This is where I was ready at the halfway point of the year. I basically wrote out a bunch of awards predictions, and I was ready to hand Rick Bowness the Jack Adams.
Mm-hmm.
This is where Rick Bowness.
This is where you
You
earn
want
it.
that Jack Adams? This is where you freaking win that Jack Adams. Like
Oh well,
you gotta
that's
find a
done.
way. Listen, it probably is
It's Jim Montgomery's.
they exactly they in Boston they probably are already ready to award that. But if he could get the Winnipeg Jets to rally back together, it's Rick Bonus's job now to get them back on this horse, get them back on that plane, and find a way to get them to soar back to their true potential over in the playoffs.
And this is why he's there. This is why he's the guy behind the bench, and rightfully so. He's the man that's been doing it throughout his career. Let's see if he's got another bullet in the chamber. Evan Davis, before we end off the show, give me your sleeper team and why they are a sleeper team to get through to the playoffs and maybe get some headway into the NHL playoffs as well.
Yeah, I mean, I know it's not like a sleeper in the standings, but I think the Dallas Stars, what they've done this entire year, Jamie Benn really revitalized himself this season. Jason Robertson, nothing to sleep at there. Rupe Hintz is finally, healthy enough to make it through 60 plus games in a regular season, as well as Joe Pavelski, signed a new contract extension. And then I think the one guy we need to be talking about here is potential Calder Trophy winner Wyatt Johnston, who the Dallas Stars didn't want to give him up for Team Canada, and there was a reason why, and it was because he has 21 goals as a rookie this year on that second line with Jamie Benn. And he's been great for them, and I think the additions that they made, getting Evgeny Dadonov and Max Domi, I said one issue was their bottom six. I think they've kind of solidified that a little bit more with Max Domi, who had a career year in Chicago. They knew they weren't going to keep him, so why not just dump him off? And I think they're good. I think their defense is nothing to sleep at here. Essa Lindell and Hakanpää are really good. Ryan Suter's like whatever. But Miro Heiskanen is on I think he is still on it, or was at least on a multi-point or a multi-game point streak, like a 10-plus game point streak. Jake Ottinger is phenomenal. That's nothing new to see out here. But I think this year I view it different than last year just because Calgary last year was just so overpowered. I don't think anybody of us expected it to go 7 games and then Jake Ottinger turned into Vasilevsky. Now that Calgary isn't that immediate threat, like I thought that Dallas team last year could have done something really special if it wasn't for Johnny Gaudreau scoring the most insane overtime goal in Game 7. But this team, I feel like, is different here. They're really, really talented, and they find numerous ways to win games. And I love them going in to the playoffs here.
Yeah, no, they're definitely a sleeper team. I mean, when you're in Dallas, you're not going to get the most attention. It's been like that throughout their entire franchise's tenure, but they got the guys to back it up. Wyatt Johnson's just been such a great surprise for them, falling right into their lap, and they've been really running with it and controlling him as well. Not letting him go play for Team Canada. Definitely a move that not many franchises would make, but they're the ones that stick to their guns. They know it's going to work, and they're seeing the rewards from it right now as they prepare for another quest for the Stanley Cup. But I mean, guys, that does it for us. Thank you guys for joining us. This has been kind of our playoff preview show. I mean, we still have a ways to go. This season is well from over, but we're getting closer, and that's the beauty about it. It's getting a little warmer outside. The feel is in the air. The words are written on the wall for many of these teams. So it's just a matter of getting there and getting through it. It's gonna be a fun playoffs to come because there's just so many teams that you can say, yeah, these guys can go through. This team can win it. This team. You can make a bracket for days with all these guys. But yeah, that'll do it for us. Again, I'm your host, Mary Russo, Evan Davis, and Jared Rotenberg. Thank you guys for tuning in as always, and take care. We'll catch you the next time when the playoffs arrive, and we will be previewing all of that very shortly. A couple weeks away, man. Take care and have a great rest of your evening. Cheers.